So let's talk about South Australian case study. This is one we've been running for 3 years now. What we've just done is update it, and I'd like to talk you through it because it actually shows a huge opportunity for biomethane. Shows a lot of opportunity, much more than we were expecting. So when we first did this study, we were looking at the wind droughts, and we're looking at saying, how long do you have to go? And it certainly became quite obvious quite quickly. You need gas to run through the wind droughts, and everybody's now talking about that, which is wonderful. And so what we did now is we thought, well, how much gas? And when you get to the levels, and I'll show you this in a minute, you can do it with biomethane. It's not very difficult. It's not huge amounts of gas. It's extremely valuable gas. More importantly is if you do it and you still have the power generation and you can use all the existing infrastructure, you'll take a large market share away from the overbuild that's presumed in the ISP for renewables. You'll take a huge chunk of it out, and you'll beat off some of the battery storage, you'll back away some of the pumped hydro, and because you actually can bid it. And you'll get more of the market share than you actually think, and we've just run this through the actual modelling. We use modelling, our modelling partners are In-Game Economics, and we do quite a bit of work with them. We're basically modelling every week because all of the people that want to get invested in this market want to see that modelling. It is a world-class case study, because there's no coal in the things, plenty of data. It's had a big battery for a while. It's got sufficient gas plant though to meet the state peak, and that's one of the really benefits of South Australia, is that it can run on gas and it can run on renewables, and it has a bit of battery as well. And there's an active program by the government too to make sure that there are transitional arrangements in place. Wind gets a good run in the state. It's a very, very interesting place to do case study work, and it now fits well within the NEM as well. It's when you run the NEM that we're showing you, South Australia is a big winner, a big winner. So this is the ISP as it was run by AEMO. I don't want to go into too much of the detail, but basically this big chunk here is the build of the what we call VRE, or variable renewable energy, the electricity, wind and solar. And the way the model works is just keeps dispatching more and more and more of it to fill up the unserved energy. And what's left over is assumed to come across interstate links. Although these days I can't see one state being reliant on another for anything in the energy sector. I think those days are going. So it is interesting to have a look at this, because if you then have a look at the utilisation against the demand, so there's demand in there is about 3,000 megawatts, the overbuild goes to 16,000 megawatts. And if you have a look at that, thousands and thousands of megawatts gets used in less than a day. So we're getting modelling that just is giving us silly answers, right? And it's not meant to be a criticism. This is a learning process. It's about us trying to figure out what goes on. We take the raw stuff and we start doing more damage to it than with this. But what it does show is that you've got to think about where you're going in that last 10, 15 years now. Not in 10 to 15 years' time, but now. I mean, that's a terrifying curve. So this is just about the modelling. I won't go into it too much. You can read it if you want to get hold of the paper, but it basically tells you how we changed the modelling. What we did is we put a constraint in that would be no unserved energy. So we had to, and we allowed the gas to fill up the hole. And what happened is that you end up with a lot more gas. In fact, this has huge implication for infrastructure. So on the right here, what you see is some of the output. The orange line is actually the maximum demand that's required out of the pipeline systems there. And the gas flow is the gas flow, as you see, is falling off. So as energy comes into the system from the renewables, it backs the gas out. What it doesn't do is back out the MDQ. So all of the infrastructure still has to be contracted right up until 2048 at least at the full MDQ of the pipelines. Let that sink in, right? Because even though you've got less and less gas, that means those pipelines are actually becoming massive storage vessels. We are already seeing pipelines in Australia where 50% or more of their revenue is coming from storage. The rest of it's throughput. What we're looking at there is that these pipelines will just be paid as storage units, and they will actually store up as much gas. Now, what's interesting is if you have a look at that, and this is South Australia, at the end point there we're less than 20 petajoules a year of gas. And that's still taking enormous market share. That's not just the amount of gas you need to back up the firming, that's the amount of market share you get by having it in there in the first place. So if I have 20 petajoules of gas, I can take market share. What does that do? And by the way, they all have to run hands on deck. So all the analysis we've shown is that the generators all run together, so you don't have to overbuild the gas either, because they all run together. This is the difference. So when you're using averaging systems, the AEMO data shows a declining MDQ in the pipelines. It's just not true. It's not meant to be a criticism again, it's just an averaging system and it shows out like that and it's no big drama. But when you actually do more granular modelling and you start putting the constraints in properly, well not properly, but those sorts of constraints in, what you see is you actually don't get a drop off in the MDQ. And so the gas infrastructure needs to be reused and repurposed, and it's got a fantastic future if you do it. And it doesn't have to have a high amount of gas going into the system. Right? The infrastructure can be the big winner here from biomethane. And it's all pretty logical when you think about it too. So we try to do it just in our trade-offs. This is for the year 2048. The impacts become quite obvious. The trade-offs between the apparent overbuild and repurposing. You get at about a 5,000 megawatt reduction in what you have to build in terms of wind and solar out of 16,000 megawatts. And it's huge gains, but from moderate levels of gas supply. Right? So people don't have to have windmills on every ridge that's in the country. Right? The other good thing about this is that the infrastructure is already there. It's underground. It's what I call the classic sunk asset. It's 6 foot down. And so you get to reuse it. It's a very sensible approach to think about where you can actually use hydrogen and biomethane. And those things are able to double their output or go to 1.7 output by being combined. They can go into the existing systems as methane. Customers can use it without changing anything at the other end. We can use all 10,000 megawatts of gas generation and we can keep the lights on and grow the renewables, and we don't have to have as many renewables as we started with. Tell me when this story starts to get bad. And we back out natural gas. Natural gas does not have to go to oblivion. Gas just transforms across to renewable gas, and the people in this industry that need to be most concerned about this are the infrastructure providers. The upstream gas guys won't worry. They've got plenty of LNG markets for a long time. The retailers won't worry, right? Because they sell electricity and gas. It's the infrastructure guys with gas in them that are the main issue here. So let me just finish off before we get questions. Am I good for time? Okay. So over the last 12, 24 months, the language has changed, and I really welcome that. Carbon neutral methane gases were not seen as the least bit viable. I used to get people say, yeah, nah, that's the Australians, for those of you who aren't from Australia, yeah, nah. It's all too hard, it's too small. What do we go, we don't know whether it's a 2,000 petajoules or 30 petajoules. I only heard up here a minute ago. Geez, we just did a report that said 2,000, come on. And it's been rejected by policymakers and even the gas industry because H2 was going to be the answer. I'm not sure what the question was, but the H2 was the answer. And the answer with H2 is it's got its own really good markets, right? And it can also play in this market as well. So now we're moving from a focus purely on hydrogen to the renewable alternative gases with the recognition that net zero low emission methane is a viable option, even if it's not, it may even be an attractive option. And it's available now, right? And you can use the existing infrastructure and the customers don't have any costs. So for the first time, we've seen the recognition of this. So in the 2023 GSU, they put not 5 petajoules, not 10 petajoules, but 80 petajoules of biomethane in the GSU. Thank you very much, AEMO. They had the guy in our masterclass on Monday, and I said to him how excellent that organisation is. It's done a wonderful job of picking up on this. And I said, I think you're a bit undershooting, but they said, well, that's a good start, right? It's a good start. And I think, even this conference has moved from a hydrogen conference to alternative gases, and we're hearing alternative gases rather than hydrogen all the time at the moment. And as I said to you, it's not a condemnation of hydrogen, it's got a huge role to play. But we really need to get that story straight to get that 300 to 600 petajoules in the market and give customers some sense that they can continue to use gas. It's not just a transference and then it's done. Thank you.